Today, we will explore the history of computing. Understanding the history of computing allows us to recognize trends and anticipate the future, as George Orwell stated, "Who controls the past commands the future." The journey begins around 4000 BC, with pictographs appearing on clay tablets. Later, Sumerian cuneiform writing was used for everyday speech. Ancient computational tools include the Sumerian multiplication table from 2700 BC and the Babylon mathematics book from 2000 BC. The Abak, meaning sand, was a predecessor of the abacus, used in Babylon around 2400 BC. In China, counting rods were used during the Zhou Dynasty, from 1046 to 256 BC. With them, Zhou Chongji and his son computed the value of pi to 7 accurate decimal places. Around 300 BC, the Roman Hand-Abacus, made of metal, featured beads in slots for whole number and fractional counting. Between 150 and 100 BC, the Antikythera Device, an ancient analog computer, was designed to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. The abacus was invented in Babylonia around 3000 BC. By 1300 AD, the wire and bead abacus replaced the Chinese calculating rods. In 1622, William Oughtred invented the circular slide rule. Later, in 1881, Edwin Thatcher created the cylindrical slide rule, with an accuracy of only 3 digits. This image shows a cylindrical slide rule with a magnifying glass. In 1612 AD, John Napier used the printed decimal point, devised logarithms, and introduced numbered sticks known as Napiers Bones for calculation. Blaise Pascal created the gear-driven adding machine called the Pascalene in 1642, marking the first mechanical adding machine. This is an example of the Pascalene, a mechanical adding machine. Here is a Pascalene signed by Pascal in 1652. Gottfried Leibniz invented the stepped reckoner in 1674, a calculator utilizing a stepped cylindrical gear. In 1801, Joseph-Marie Jacquard in France invented the automatic loom, which used punched cards to control fabric patterns. These images show the operation and components of the Jacquard loom and its punched card system. The Thomas Arithmometer was the first mass-marketed and widely copied calculator, manufactured for 90 years, starting in 1820. Charles Babbage introduced the design for the difference engine in 1832. This is a detailed image of Charles Babbage's difference engine. Babbage also designed the Analytical engine, a mechanical, general-purpose computer run on steam. It used punched cards for input and could perform arithmetic operations, comparisons, and square roots. Augusta Ada King, Countess of Lovelace, is often called the world's first programmer. Between 1842 and 1843, she translated and supplemented an article on Babbage's engine with elaborate notes. The computer language Ada was named after her. Augusta Ada King, Countess of Lovelace, played a significant role in the computer revolution. In 1844, Samuel Morse invented the telegraph. Charles Babbage designed an improved difference engine, no 2 feet, between 1847 and 1849. A working model was constructed by the Science Museum in London from 1989 to 1991. This image shows Doron Swade, curator of computing at the Science Museum, next to Babbage's difference engine number 2. Another view of the constructed Babbage difference engine number 2. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876. In 1882, William S. Burroughs left his bank clerk job to invent an adding machine. This image illustrates the use of an adding machine. Another view of an early adding machine. A bank clerk using an adding machine for calculations. The introduction of computers vastly outperformed bank calculists, who made mistakes and calculated slowly for high salaries. Computers, being faster and more accurate, changed the nature of this work. Herman Hollerith developed the electric tabulating system in 1889. John A. Fleming patented the diode vacuum tube in 1904, which was a crucial step for better radio communication. In 1924, T.J. Watson renamed the computing tabulating recording company to International Business Machine, or IBM, and popularized the Think slogan. In 1935, IBM introduced the 601 multiplying punch card machine and the electronic typewriter. The punch card was a crucial invention, used for data input, processing, and output in early computing devices. This image illustrates a punch card capable of storing 5 megabytes of data. Hewlett-Packard was formed in 1938 by William Hewlett and David Packard in a garage in Palo Alto, California. This garage is where the company started, famously recognized as the birthplace of Silicon Valley. The early work included electronic test equipment and later diversified into computers and printers. A look at William Hewlett and David Packard working on their early electronic products. In 1941, the Atanasoff-Berry Computer, the first automatic electronic digital computer, was used by Atanasoff and Berry to compute complicated algebraic equations. This image shows a replica of the Atanasoff-Berry Computer. More details on the Atanasoff-Berry Computer, a pioneering machine in computing history. A diagram illustrating the various components of the Atanasoff-Berry Computer. 1943 saw the development of Colossus, a British vacuum tube computer by Alan Turing, Tommy Flowers, and M.H.A. Newman. It is considered the first all-electronic calculating device. The Colossus was a massive machine used during World War II for cryptography. The Harvard Mark I, or IBM Automatic Sequence Controlled Calculator, was produced by Howard Aiken in 1944. It was one of the earliest electromechanical computers. In 1945, Grace Hopper found the first computer bug, a moth causing a relay failure in the Mark II prototype. First-generation computers relied on vacuum tubes for memory and CPU circuitry, with a typical life of only 3,000 hours. ENIAC, the Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, was another early large-scale machine. These images show two women operating the ENIAC, illustrating the size and complexity of the machine. Launched in 1946, ENIAC was the first electronic programmable general-purpose computer. It weighed 60,000 pounds, took up 1,800 square feet, and contained 18,000 tubes. In 1947, John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley developed the first transistor at Bell Labs. The Manchester Mark I, or Baby Machine, became the first operational stored program digital computer on June 21, 1948, using vacuum tube circuits. The Whirlwind computer, with J. Forrester at MIT, was placed in service in 1949 as the first real-time computer, containing 5,000 vacuum tubes. A view of the extensive circuitry and components of an early computer system. In 1951, J. Forrester filed a patent application for the matrix core memory, a significant development in computer storage. Grace Murray Hopper developed A0 in 1952, the first compiler, which introduced the idea of automatic programming and language translation. Texas Instruments introduced the silicon transistor in 1954, which helped pave the way for lower manufacturing costs. The first hard disk drive was the IBM RAMAC, or Random Access Method of Accounting and Control, in 1956, featuring a 5 megabytes capacity. In 1957, John Backus and colleagues at IBM delivered the first Fortran compiler, a crucial language for scientific and engineering computing. Jack Kilby developed a prototype semiconductor integrated circuit, or IC, at Texas Instruments in 1958. Also in 1958, Bell's development of the modem data phones allowed telephone lines to transmit binary data, enabling early data communication. The Committee on Data Systems Languages, CODISL, was formed in 1959 to create COBOL, the Common Business-Oriented Language. John McCarthy developed LIS, or list processing, in 1959, which became fundamental for artificial intelligence applications. General Electric produced the GE IRMA in 1959 to process checks in banking using magnetic ink character recognition, or MICR. DEC introduced the PDP-1 in 1960, the first commercial computer with a monitor and keyboard input. In 1961, the first industrial robot, patented by Georg C. Duval, was marketed by Unimation and first used for manufacturing TV picture tubes. MIT graduate student Steve Russell invented the first video game in 1962, which quickly gained popularity in computer labs across the U.S. The Telstar communications satellite was launched in 1962, relaying the first transatlantic television pictures. In 1963, the American National Standards Institute accepted ASCII, the 7-bit code for information exchange, setting a standard for character encoding. IBM announced the System/363rd generation line of computers in 1964, a major step forward in computer architecture. BASIC, or Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code, was developed at Dartmouth by John Kemeny and Thomas Kurtz in 1964. Doug Engelbart invented the mouse in 1964, transforming how people would interact with computers. The early mouse design used wheels for tracking movement. In 1965, DEC debuted the PDP-8, the first mini-computer, which utilized transistor circuitry modules for a smaller footprint. In 1965, at the University of Belgrade, Rajko Tomovic made one of the earliest attempts to develop an artificial limb with a sense of touch. A Federal Information Processing Standard in 1968 encouraged the use of the 6-digit date format YYMMDD for information interchange. This decision inadvertently contributed to the, quote, year 2000 crisis. Also in 1968, Robert Noyce, Andy Grove, and Gordon Moore established Intel, incorporating the company on July 18. In 1970, Shakey, developed at SRI International, became the first robot to use artificial intelligence to navigate its environment. Unix was developed at Bell Labs in 1970 by Dennis Ritchie and Kenneth Thompson, forming a foundational operating system. In 1970, the floppy disk and the daisy wheel printer made their debut, marking significant advancements in data storage and printing technology. The Intel 4004 microprocessor, developed in 1971 by Ted Hoff, S. Mazer, and F. Fagan, was a, quote, computer on a chip. This 4-bit processor was initially intended for a calculator. Also in 1971, Ray Tomlinson of Bolt Beranek and Newman sent the very first network email message. A change in communication methods is highlighted by news from February 23, 2012. The U.S. Postal Service planned to close mail processing facilities and cut 35,000 jobs to reduce operating costs amid annual losses. In 1971, Nicholas Wirth developed the Pascal programming language. By 1972, handheld calculators became widely popular, rendering the slide rule obsolete. In 1972, Dennis Ritchie developed the C programming language at Bell Labs. It was named C because its predecessor was named B. Also in 1972, Alain Komarauer at the University of Marseille developed Prolog, which helped to popularize key logic programming concepts. The DEC's PDP 1145 was introduced in 1972, featuring its circuitry encased in integrated circuit chips. In 1972, Steve Wozniak built a blue box tone generator to make free phone calls and sold them in the UC Berkeley dorm. In 1973, Alan Kay developed a forerunner of the PC, his, quote, office computer. Based on Smalltalk, it utilized icons, graphics, and a mouse. This display is equipped with a vertical orientation. This image highlights the components of the office computer: the keyboard, the mouse, and the hard disk drive. The screen shows a simulation of the Xerox Alto operating system environment. The screen displays a graphical user interface for file management on the Xerox Alto simulation. A drawing program interface from the Xerox Alto simulation is visible here, demonstrating early graphical capabilities. This scene shows the title screen for the game Missile Command 3.0, running on the simulated Xerox Alto 2. A screen displaying an early pool game simulation on the Xerox Alto 2 is shown. In 1972, Nolan Bushnell founded Atari. Notably, he hired both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak at Atari. The first PC, the Altair 8800, was made available as a kit by Edward Roberts Micro-Instrumentation and Telemetry Systems, MITS, in 1974. Bill Gates and Paul Allen created a basic compiler for the Altair. This slide shows the Altair 8800 computer equipped with an 8-inch floppy disk system. In 1975, IBM introduced the IBM 3800, one of the earliest laser printers. This is a close-up image of the IBM 3800 laser printer. In 1976, Seymour Cray introduced the Cray 1 from Cray Research, the first supercomputer to use a vectorial architecture. In 1976, Gary Kildall created CP/M, which stands for Control Program for Microcomputers. CP/M, developed by Gary Kildall, could have been the OS for the IBM PC instead of MS-DOS, but Kildall insisted on only licensing it, while IBM wanted full ownership. Various advertisements for CP/M are shown on this slide, highlighting its use in early personal computing. Tim Patterson, the original author of 86DOS, is featured here. 86DOS became MS-DOS, the dominant personal computer operating system of the 1980s. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak developed the Apple I, which was merely a single circuit board. In 1977, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak incorporated Apple Computer. Later that year, the Apple II was announced, setting the standard for personal computers. This slide features an image of Steve Jobs. A portrait of Steve Jobs is shown. This slide features an image of Steve Jobs. Another image of Steve Jobs is displayed. In 1977, Bill Gates and Paul Allen founded Microsoft, initially setting up their company in Albuquerque, New Mexico. PCs from Tandy and Commodore were introduced in 1977 with built-in monitors. Many attendees saw the Apple II and Commodore PET at the first West Coast Computer Fair. DEC introduced the VAX 11780ths in 1978. This 32-bit computer became very popular for technical and scientific applications. Visicalc, the first spreadsheet program, was a major application software breakthrough in 1978, created by Daniel Bricklin and Bob Frankston. In 1979, Micropro International released WordStar, which became a standard for word processing systems, especially popular with CP/M and later DOS computers. Motorola introduced the 68000 chip in 1979, which would later be used to power the Macintosh computer. Digital video discs, or LD, appeared in 1979 through the joint efforts of Sony and Philips. Also in 1979, cellular telephones underwent testing in Japan and Chicago. In 1981, IBM entered the PC market with the IBM PC. It was supported by the DOS operating system developed by Microsoft, which retained all profits while bearing the development costs. Less than 4 months after the IBM PC's introduction in 1980, Time magazine named the computer as the Man of the Year. This was the first and only time an inanimate object received this title. The Ada programming language emerged in 1980 after a long development. Named after Ada Augusta King, it was developed by the U.S. Department of Defense for process control and embedded applications. In 1980, Wayne Ratliff developed DBase 2, the first version of a PC database program, which enjoyed wide market success. The 2 was added for a high-tech sound, despite no DBase ever existing. Also in 1980, the Osborne 1 portable computer was introduced. It weighed 24 pounds and was the size of a small suitcase. This image shows a subsequent model of the Osborne 1 with a redesigned casing. The concept of RISC, or Reduced Instruction Set Computing, developed in 1980. David A. Patterson began using the term, and John Hennessy developed the concept. ARM, the Android CPU, is one example of RISC architecture. 1981 marked a turning point as the open architecture IBM PC launched in August. This event signaled that desktop computing was going mainstream for corporate America. In 1982, the first IBM PC clone was produced by Columbia Data Products. Compaq soon followed with its own version. Also in 1982, Autodesk was founded and shipped the first version of AutoCAD, a computer-aided design software later that year. In 1982, John Warnock and Charles Geschke founded Adobe Systems, which would later create PostScript, a page description language. Mitch Kapor introduced Lotus 123 in 1983. It quickly took over spreadsheet supremacy from Visicalc by including graphics like pie and bar charts. The year 1983 also saw the completion of the TCP/IP switchover, which formally marked the creation of the global internet. In 1983, at AT&T Bell Labs, Bjarne Stroustrup continued his work on C++. This was an object-oriented extension to the C programming language. The Apple Macintosh, introduced in 1984, was the first computer sold in retail to feature a mouse-driven graphical user interface, or GUI. In 1984, the CD-ROM was introduced by Sony and Philips, offering significantly greater storage capacity for digital data. Motorola introduced a RISC CPU of the MC68020 in 1984, featuring 250,000 transistors. In 1984, NEC manufactured a 256 kilobit chip, and IBM introduced a 1 megabit RAM chip, pushing forward memory capacity. The term hackers gained media attention in 1985 as computers were attacked. A break-in at Los Alamos National Laboratory was traced to a group of teenagers in Milwaukee, known as the 414 Hackers. Paul Brainerd's PageMaker became the first PC desktop publishing program in 1985. It was widely used, initially on the Macintosh, and later on IBM compatibles. Microsoft Windows 1.0 was launched on November 20, 1985, beginning Microsoft's move into graphical operating systems. In 1990, Microsoft introduced Windows 3.0, intensifying a legal dispute with Apple over the software's look and feel resemblance to the Macintosh operating system. Berners-Lee wrote the initial prototype for the World Wide Web in 1990, utilizing his creations, URLs, HTML, and HTTP. The PowerPC alliance between IBM, Motorola, and Apple was announced on July 30, 1991, aiming to compete with Intel processors. In 1993, Apple released the Newton, the first popular personal digital assistant, although the first generation struggled with handwriting recognition. Intel's Pentium processor was introduced in March 1993, setting a new standard for performance in personal computers. Also in 1993, students and staff at the University of Illinois created NCSA Mosaic, a graphical user interface for internet navigation that became a popular early web browser. GPS, or Global Positioning System, reached initial operational capability in December 1993. Dr. Gladys West's mathematical models of the Earth were foundational to GPS accuracy. In 1995, the Java programming language was created, enabling platform-independent application development. This slide references a 2017 social media post by James Gosling, the father of Java, where he discusses experiencing age discrimination while job searching. Windows 95 was launched on August 24, 1995, with significant public fanfare, introducing key user interface elements still familiar today.